In the next few minutes, you will discover a secret that could completely change your prayer life. Have you ever felt like you are walking without direction, as if God were far away? So get ready, because what you're going to hear today could be the answer you've been missing. Don't leave before the end, because the revelation that comes next will surprise you, and it could be exactly what you needed to see God's hand guiding your steps. The steps of those who trust in the Lord are not random. Nothing happens by chance for those who walk with God. He guides, supports, and straightens the paths, even when everything seems confusing. But are we really paying attention to His direction? Early morning prayer and daily devotional are spiritual compasses that help us perceive divine signs. Sometimes a closed door today is the hand of God preventing a disaster tomorrow. Stumbling is part of the journey, but falling will never be the fate of those who lean on the Lord. Imagine a child learning to walk. She falls, but her father always reaches out to lift her. This is how God is with those who seek Him. He does not promise us the absence of falls, but He guarantees that He will never leave us alone. Morning prayer is the impulse that strengthens tired feet and renews the courage to continue. But how to discern this direction? The answer may be in a verse that catches your eye, in an inexplicable peace in your heart, or even in an unexpected obstacle. Who has never found themselves faced with a closed path, only to later realize that it was deliverance? Prayer for blessings is not just asking, but also learning to listen. God speaks, but are we listening? Many try to walk alone, relying only on their own strength. But how often does this end in frustration? The Lord knows the path even before the first step. He sees what our eyes cannot see and delivers us from what we do not perceive. When fear hits, remember, Christian prayer is more powerful than any insecurity. Early morning prayer places us at the center of His will and gives us clarity to move forward. And even when it seems like we are lost, God continues to guide us. The Bible is full of stories of people who trusted, even if they didn't understand everything at the time. Abraham left his land without knowing where he was going. David was chosen king when he was still herding sheep. The secret? Faith and obedience. Those who walk with God do not need to see everything. They need to trust that He sees. The question is, are we really allowing God to direct our steps? Or do we still insist on paths that only lead to more tiredness and uncertainty? For those who choose to trust, there is something even deeper to understand. A truth that strengthens us, gives us courage, and teaches us to rest in the promise that we will never be alone. Being strong and courageous is not always easy, especially when uncertainty knocks at the door. But God does not make empty promises. He assures us that He will never leave us alone, no matter what we face. Have you ever noticed how, in the most difficult moments, a strength emerges that you didn't even know you had? This is no coincidence. This is God sustaining you. Early morning prayer and daily devotional are powerful weapons to remember that fear may even whisper, but it should never command our decisions. Life is full of challenges, and fear tries to paralyze. But what happens when someone decides to trust God? Things may not change immediately, but the certainty that He is present changes everything. Imagine a soldier going into battle knowing he has an invincible army at his side. This is how it is for those who stand firm in the morning prayer and in Christian prayer. Fear may even approach, but courage comes from above. What if, instead of asking yourself, what if it goes wrong, you started thinking, what if God is preparing something bigger? The problem is not in the storm, but in the way we face it. Moses had to trust when the sea was still closed. Joshua had to march around the walls before they fell. Faith is not waiting for perfect conditions. It is moving forward even without seeing the path. Prayer for blessings reminds us that the answer may be just a step away. Often, what we lack is not strength, but courage to trust. How many opportunities have been missed due to fear of making mistakes? How many dreams were left on paper due to lack of faith? The Lord calls us to advance, not retreat. When He says, "I will not leave you nor forsake you," He is ensuring that His presence accompanies us at every step. Early morning prayer and daily devotional reinforce this truth within us. What if fear still persists? Look back and see how many times God has supported you. You are not where you are by chance. Each obstacle overcome was proof that He was always present. But there is something even deeper in this journey, a secret that brings peace in the midst of chaos and teaches us to rest even when everything seems turbulent. The peace that God gives is not like that of the world. It does not depend on circumstances. It is not fragile or fleeting. It is a peace that transcends understanding. Have you ever felt that inexplicable calm in the midst of a difficult situation? This is God's work. Early morning prayer and daily devotional are keys to living this peace. Those who learn to trust in Him discover that their hearts can remain serene, even when the winds blow strong. The secret is not in avoiding problems, but in knowing that God is in control. Philippians 4:7 teaches us that this peace needs no explanation. She just comes. Have you ever seen someone who, even in the face of a great challenge, continues to smile, firm, unshakable? This is not the absence of struggles, but the certainty that one does not fight alone. Morning prayer and Christian prayer are sources of this unshakable confidence. Think about it. How many sleepless nights could be avoided if, instead of worrying, we gave everything to God? Prayer not only changes situations, but it transforms those who pray. When we trust, anxiety loses strength. Prayer for blessings is not just asking for answers, but allowing God to calm the storm within us before calming the one outside. It's easy to trust when everything is fine, but what about when problems come? The world teaches us to look for human solutions, but God invites us to rest in Him. And resting in God does not mean passivity, but action in faith. It means praying, acting wisely, and letting Him do the impossible. Those who put early morning prayer and daily devotional as a daily practice learn to walk without being shaken. So, the question is not whether challenges will come, but how we will face them. Those who have faith do not despair, because they know that above all circumstances, God remains in control. But there is something even stronger than peace, a faith capable of moving the impossible, breaking down barriers and transforming any reality. Having faith is not just believing. It is acting as someone who has already received the answer. Jesus taught us that if we have faith the size of a mustard seed, we can move mountains. But do we really live this faith? How many times do we pray, but then doubt right after? Early morning prayer and daily devotional are ways to strengthen this faith and learn to truly trust. Faith is more than words. It is attitude. Imagine a farmer who plants a seed. He does not see the harvest on the first day, but he continues watering, believing that the seed will grow. This is how our faith should be. Morning prayer and Christian prayer are spiritual watering cans that strengthen our roots. Those who trust persist. Those who believe do not back down in the face of difficulty. What if the answer hasn't come yet? The issue is not time, but the certainty that God is already acting. Those who trust do not despair, because they know that His will is always the best. Faith is not feeling, it is deciding. Prayer for blessings teaches us to speak to God as a child speaks to the Father with conviction, without doubt, knowing that He hears and responds. But be careful. Faith does not mean absence of action. If you are praying for an open door, be ready to take the first step when it opens. The Bible is full of examples of people who were blessed because they acted in faith. Peter walked on water because he had the courage to get out of the boat. Those who seek God in the early morning prayer and daily devotional learn to listen and obey without hesitation. Many wait to see to believe, but God teaches us to believe before seeing. This is the true secret to experiencing miracles. But there is something even greater than faith, a principle that makes us walk even without seeing, trust even without understanding, move forward even when everything seems uncertain. Walking by faith and not by sight is a challenge. Everything inside us wants to see, feel, be sure before acting. But God calls us to trust in the invisible. If we only look at what is visible, we will be guided by emotions, fears, and circumstances. But whoever walks by faith follows the voice of God, not appearances. Early morning prayer and daily devotional are practices that teach us how to develop this trust. Think about a GPS. It doesn't show you the entire path at once, just the next turn. This is the walk with God. He guides us step by step. Many want to have all the answers before moving forward, but God only asks us to take the next step. Morning prayer and Christian prayer help us trust this process. But what about when things don't make sense? Joseph was sold into slavery before becoming governor. Moses passed through the desert before freeing Israel. God works in unexpected ways. Prayer for blessings teaches us to believe, even without seeing. Those who trust do not despair, because they know that God never fails. And now, the question is, are we truly living by faith or just reacting to circumstances? Those who live by faith are not shaken by bad news, because they know that God is already in control. Those who feed on the early morning prayer and the daily devotional learn to walk even in the dark, as they trust that the Lord illuminates each step. Many people ask God for direction, but when He speaks, they hesitate to obey. The greatest secret to experiencing miracles is not just praying, but acting according to God's response. Have you noticed how some people spend years waiting for a change, but nothing happens? Could the problem be delay or lack of obedience? The truth is that God does not give new steps to those who do not obey the first. Think about Pedro, who had to cast the net again after a whole night without catching anything. In human eyes, it made sense to give up, but he trusted and obeyed, and the miracle happened. Often, the answer you seek has already been given, but fear, doubt, or even stubbornness prevent you from taking action. Early morning prayer and daily devotional are not just requests, they are times to listen and move in the right direction. What if your miracle was already waiting for your obedience? How many opportunities could you be missing by not fully trusting? God does not need logic to act. He needs faith. And true faith is not limited to words, but to concrete steps. When He says go, don't question it, just go. Morning prayer and Christian prayer help us align our hearts with His voice. But how do you know if what you feel is really God's will? Simple. God never leads us away from His principles. What He says confirms His word and brings peace, even when it seems challenging. Prayer for blessings is more than asking. It is aligning our lives with His will. And when that happens, miracles begin to manifest naturally. The problem is that many want to see the miracle before acting, but God asks us to act before seeing. He wants total trust, not a faith that depends on visible signs. Those who learn to trust His direction see doors opening where there were only walls before. But there is one last secret on this journey, something that few understand and that can completely change your prayer life. And when you pray, seek, ask for direction, and God doesn't seem to respond, if this has ever happened to you, know that you are not alone. We've all had moments when it feels like the sky is silent, but is God really silent, or is He already acting in a way that you haven't noticed yet? Often, God's silence is actually a test of faith. Imagine a teacher giving a test. During the explanation, he talks the entire time, but when it comes to the test, he shuts up. God acts the same way. He has already taught you. He has already shown you the way, and now He wants to see if you really trust. Early morning prayer and daily devotional are fundamental in these moments, as they keep your heart firm until the answer comes. What if silence is preparation for something bigger? Gold only becomes pure after passing through fire. Jose spent years in prison before becoming governor. David fled before becoming king. God's silence is never a sign of abandonment, but of a process that He is leading. Morning prayer and Christian prayer help us remember that even without answers, He remains in control. But what can we do while God seems to be silent? Keep moving. Keep praying, serving, being faithful, trusting. The answer may not come in your time, but it will come in the perfect time. And when it comes, it will be bigger than you imagined. Prayer for blessings is not just about receiving, but about being ready to support what God is preparing. The question is not whether God will respond, but whether you will continue to trust while you wait. Many give up on the eve of the miracle, without realizing that they were one step away from seeing the promise fulfilled. But if you've come this far, it's because God wants to take you even further. Now, what will you do with this revelation? What if I told you that you already have everything you need to fulfill God's purpose in your life? Many people live waiting for a sign from the heavens, a great supernatural event to confirm their calling. But the truth is that God has already planted within you the seeds of what He wants to do. The question is, are you watering these seeds or waiting for something extraordinary before taking action? Moses thought he wasn't capable until God showed him that what he needed was already in his hands, a simple staff. David didn't need sophisticated armor to defeat Goliath, just a sling and stones. God does not use those who are capable. He empowers those who are available. Early morning prayer and daily devotional are times to align your life with what He has already placed within you. But how do you discover your purpose? Start by observing what God has already placed around you. What are the opportunities that arise? What makes your heart burn? What do you do well and can bless other people? Sometimes God's call comes not with a thunderclap in the sky, but with small daily directions. Morning prayer and Christian prayer are keys to realizing these directions. Many waste years waiting for an ideal moment, while God is saying, go with what you have. Perfection will never be a requirement to get started. The disciples were not experts when Jesus called them, but they said yes and were transformed along the way. Prayer for blessings is not just to ask for things, but to receive clarity about what God has already given you. What if what's holding you back is the fear of making mistakes? God doesn't wait for you to have all the answers before He acts. He only asks that you trust and take the first step. Every day of waiting without acting is one less day of fulfilling what He has prepared for you. What will you do with this truth now? Because there is something bigger waiting for you. And the only thing missing is your decision to move forward. Now, the question that remains is, will you keep waiting or will you take the first step in the direction God has already prepared for you? It's no use just listening. You need to act. What you learn today can transform your life, but only if you put it into practice. So, start now. Take a moment to early morning prayer, do daily devotional, a non-negotiable habit, and ask God for clarity to follow the steps He is already showing you. Write in the comments, what spoke most to your heart today? Which part of this video impacted you the most? Your answer may inspire others. And if you want to continue learning and growing spiritually, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Here, you will always find words that will strengthen your faith and help you walk in God's purpose. Don't miss the next videos. They might be just what you need to hear.